Over the course of my 8th grade year, I have been working on my capstone project, in which I argue that funding for the space program should be a priority for the U.S. In support of my thesis, I interviewed 3 different scientists about their thoughts, opinions, and point of view while working with the space program. The first scientist that appears in this video is Rayul Patel, and he is an astrophysicist at Caltech. The second scientist that appears in this video is Tom Nolan, and he is an earth science scientist at JPL. The third scientist that appears in this video is Shannon McConnell, and she's an education and public engagement lead for the Space Network at JPL. These are a few of the questions that I asked that were answered.
So the space program, at least in the U.S., is mostly composed of NASA. NASA is the National Aeronautics Space Administration. It's, the job is to, one of the aspects of NASA is to explore the solar system to make sure that we are space capable. The United States, anyways. And different countries have different space programs with different capabilities. So the European Space Agency is sort of like NASA. It's equivalent to what NASA is in this country. The Canadians have their own space agency. The Japanese, the Russians, India, China, all these other major countries all have different space agencies to get us off the Earth, to study things in space, around the Earth, in our solar system, and even look down at Earth to help solve problems that we might have currently, and even predict the future, predict and help with future problems that might later occur, geographically or otherwise. So the more funding that NASA has in general would mean there would be more money for pure research-based work. And so the more funding there is in the space program, the better it is for my work. Right now, people are very much interested in what's going on with NASA and with some of the discoveries that have been happening. But as more and more of that funding gets cut, and more of that money gets allocated to different aspects of the government, then the work. We want to do more work in terms of basic research, in terms of space exploration, but you need money to do that. You need money to fund telescopes. You need money to fund people, to give them salaries, for the instruments that they might use, for travel costs, to collaborate with people across the entire world. When the space agencies have less money to go around, it really affects everyone else's work.
One of the things that we say at NASA is the impossible is temporary, because in the short life of NASA, it started in the late 50s, in the short life there's been so many things that were impossible that have been proven to be done. One example of that I often use is the Wright brothers, for the first time in humanity, flew in 1903. But 66 years later, less than one lifetime, less than one generation, Neil Armstrong had a boot on the moon. From never flying to being on the moon, that's pretty amazing. Almost every product that you have, that you use in your daily life, has come from or been enhanced by the space program. So a lot of the engineering and the science that we use in our space program has come to fruition in your daily life.
So we are fully federally funded. So if we don't get any federal funding, we don't have jobs.
Yeah.
So it's a direct, it's a direct consequence of federal funding. What happens is we operate actually on a contract through Caltech. The funding that you provide to space exploration does not just go into building spacecraft and flying them to other planets. It also goes into what we call technology transfer. So things that we develop and build and fly are things that will help you as a citizen on Earth down the road. So all of the micro devices, like what's on your phone, what drives your phone, all that hardware and software, a lot of micro devices in the medical industry, in terms of tiny nano-sized instruments and different types of robotic surgical procedures that you can now do on home installation properties, just types of things like that. So those are things that filter down into the general populace down the road. So when we fund a spacecraft development, we get that offshoot of product development later on. So.
The cell phone camera you have was developed at JPL. The miniaturization of data to compress data was by the Galileo mission out of necessity. And so every data compression that you have where you can fit tons of data on a little SD card or within your phone is phenomenal, and that all comes out of the compression of data that was started by NASA.
We had a big decrease in funding recently. We had one 3 or 4 years ago. And we've been kind of in a static pattern since then. We haven't gotten an increase in funding either. So as costs continue to rise, it's like a decrease in funding.
If there's not a lot of money to go around, then it restricts money being given to observatories, to different facilities so that they can operate, that we can use. So facilities like different telescopes that might be on the ground, facilities that are in space, even future missions. Sometimes you have to send a telescope up into space takes 10, 15 years of planning. And you want to make sure that there's enough money at the end for it to finally get launched, get put up there, and for us to actually use later on. So if there's a limitation on the amount of money that's available, that means that it limits the science that we can do.
So we're advancing our understanding of our planet and understanding of ourselves. And in a faith perspective, we also understand God's great plan. And what I see is the majesty of how beautifully He created the earth, how beautifully He created us people, and how we all have to work to take care of this planet as caring for creation, the stewardship of earth we've been assigned. And so my role as a Catholic and my role as a scientist fit perfectly together, that God gave us a great planet and we're supposed to take care of it. And that's my job.
To conclude my documentary, there is a proposed deal that NASA would receive $1.1 billion increase in funding in 2018. Thank you.